So, ben arrivati, welcome everybody. Thank you for coming, for joining us. It's really a pleasure to meet you here, to see you here and see that you are so many this year. And it's also a pleasure to meet this 7th edition of this Sustainable and Impact Investment International Conference. It's also a pleasure to stay here in Lewis, this private university, this prestigious private university, and also this wonderful location, I would say. Brings me back to when I was a younger researcher teaching here banking and finance. But because we are, Lewis is a founder partner of this conference, and I'm very happy that this year we can host this conference in this location. And this is also why I want, before going deeper into the agenda, I have the pleasure to give the floor to Professor Muro to give the greetings and the welcome by University of Lewis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome everyone. So this is really a pleasure for us to host this really important conference, at least for two reasons. First of all, because I have the occasion to see a lot of friends or colleagues, as you want. And second, because of course, this is a very important topic that is like a hot topic today, but maybe 7 years ago was less relevant. So it's really a pleasure to host this conference that sometimes can be well, an anticipator for the future. So maybe the topic that today and tomorrow will be discussed will be very relevant in the next 5-10 years. And well, it's the first time that I am from this side of the table, so I know only one thing, that I should be very short. So again, welcome everyone. I hope that tomorrow and also this afternoon should be a more sunny day, because this room is nice today, but with the sun it's really wonderful. And again, have a good conference.
Thank you once again for hosting this edition here. We have to, first of all, I have to bring the greetings by Professor Giannotti, who was attending here to represent our Association of Teachers in Financial Intermediaries, but is not feeling very well, so I'm so sorry not being here, but we anyway appreciate the fact that he tried until the last second. But we have two representatives of Sapienza University. I have the pleasure to give the floor to Professor Livio De Santoli, who is our Prorector for Sustainability. Sapienza is doing so much with respect to sustainable transition and sustainable growth, and also trying to find a way of how universities have to interpret this change, which is a transversal change, and of course is going to impact on all our faculties, and there are so many. So Livio, please.
Thank you, Mario. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here in this welcome address for this very important conference. And just to say a few words about our work in Sapienza concerning sustainability. Since 3 years, there is a committee, transversal committee, interdisciplinary committee, with members which come from different faculties of Sapienza. In Sapienza, we have 11 different faculties, so macro area, which give competence in this committee in order to define a sustainability policy for Sapienza, for educational, research, third and fourth missions. And in the last 3 years, we produce some of this policy. the topic of this conference is really very, very crucial in the process of transition, coming from an old model towards a very new and innovative model, which is the topic of sustainable and impact investments. And this is the reason why in our committee we have people coming from the economical aspect, competence. And right now, in the last months, Sapienza decided to forbid any kind of relationship with outside enterprise and companies which finance the research in Sapienza if they are not included in a very proper way in the path of sustainability, which means fight to climate change, decarbonization process, and so on. This could be very, very important in order to give an example to the academic world, because the moment which we are living now include an urgency and a very clear way to carry on our academic work. So it's very interesting today and tomorrow follow your work here. Thank you again, Mario, and we will see soon because Mario is one of the members of our committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Livio. Yes, indeed. I mean, we have a very intensive program today and tomorrow as well, but today is, dedicated to the academic section. So we actually received so many interesting papers this year, but I will come back on that later on. So I really feel that it will be very interesting, both for an academic perspective and a perspective more tailored to practitioners. But I'm very much confident on that. Thank you very much. Second greeting by Professor Alberto Pastore, who is actually leading our Department of Management at Sapienza University, my department actually. So with Alberto, we also share an experience when we were younger here in Lewis, when this university had just, a branch in Via Pola, and so it's, interesting to meet today here after so many years. So Alberto, thank you for coming, actually.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Mario, for inviting me to the opening session of this important conference. And I'm so happy to give myself my welcome greetings to the Social Impact Investment, International Conference that is held by Sapienza, Department of Management, Luis, and also Unitelma Sapienza, together with some other prestigious international partners. As Mario said, I'm particularly glad to be here because I've been teaching here for many years when I was young. And I'm the first person bringing an introductory greeting, so I have to be very short. I know your feelings, you can't wait to start the core activities of the conference. But let me share with you just a few introductory words, 3 minutes, 180 seconds. So first of all, I'm deeply convinced that events like this that brings together university, institutions, businesses, and civil society, events like this contribute greatly to creating value for society and the economy. And this is the university that I like, in which I recognize myself, the one that knows how to dialogue and create value with all the stakeholders. And secondly, I'd like to share with you that in our department, there is an excellent research group that is committed to sustainability issues and sustainable finance in particular. And this event, we know, comes precisely from this area of specialization and of research, and we are really very proud of this. And we are also very pleased, Mario, with the relevant relationships that you and your colleagues have built around the conference with other universities, institutions, and businesses. And last, let me be not too much serious now. Have you ever wondered how to measure the relevance of a conference? In my opinion, there are 4 indicators. The first is the number of people that extend an institutional greeting, and we have a lot. The second is the brevity of the institutional greetings, and I'm going to be compliant on this because I have just 1 minute left. And now I'm just a little more serious. The third is the relevance and the topicality of the conference theme. And we have no doubt about that sustainable finance is an hot topic. And this conference in particular is recognized as an elective meeting place for international scholars, practitioners, and policymakers involved in this so relevant field. And finally, the fourth element is the high quality of the content, of course, which depends on the prestige of the speakers. And since we all have seen the conference program, we know that we are on a very high level. Therefore, it is my pleasure to congratulate again Professor Mario Latorre and the entire scientific and organizational team for having organized the conference. And it's my pleasure to thank you all, the keynote speakers, scholars, managers, policymakers, and all the participants who decided to attend the event. I hope that you will have a great experience, best wishes, and good conference.
And thank you very much. And thank you for these compliments, but I would say wait until the end. Wait until the end. And cross fingers that everything is going well. So thank you very much for these sweet words, and also for the suggestion about some parameters, some KPIs, which are actually which we have to consider, and indeed, I don't remember if it was the second, the number of the institutional representative. The first. So thank you, because it reminds me that today also Professor Roberto Pascal should have been here, but once again he's not feeling well. So it's my pleasure to bring his greetings, and remembering that Uniterma Sapienza, together with Luis, Guido Carli, and Sapienza University, is one of the founder promoter of this conference. So before getting into the agenda, let me first thank our sponsor, Medio Credito Centrale Invitalia, is not only sponsoring and promoting the conference, but also, and this is something that we really appreciate, is also supporting the Best Paper Award that we are going to announce tomorrow afternoon before the end of the second day, and it's something that I really appreciate a lot, and it's something that all researchers look for actually. But of course, let me also thank to all our partners. We have a lot. I would say a special thank to Lucia Alessi by the Joint Research Center, because she did a great work around this conference during several months, I would say. But I will come back on our partnerships, and we come back on this point later in the afternoon, because we have to make an announcement because this edition is a special edition with respect to past editions, because we have enlarged our partnership, and also we are thinking about, you know, bringing forward this conference in let's say different way by next year, but I don't want to anticipate so much. As for the today agenda, it's a full agenda, but then don't worry, because then we have a gala dinner to relax, and some coffee break and lunch break as well. But the agenda starts with a keynote speech, and I'll come back on that. And then we will have a coffee break to, you know, to relax a little bit. And after, we will start with the traditional parallel sessions where we are going to present papers. And it's very comfortable, the situation, because we will have this parallel session here and other two parallel sessions just in front of this room, so very easy. I'm not sure about, you know, the location of the coffee break and the lunchtime, but we will discover very shortly. I would suggest all the authors to make sure that they have made available the slides for the presentation, because of course they are have been uploaded have been uploaded by the authors. So if not, please, during the coffee break, pay attention and maybe contact someone of the organization in order to upload your presentation on the computer. And of course, you have a QR code on the program, and you can go on the details of the program, and also on details about location, so and see in which room you are scheduled, and your presentation is scheduled. So the staff of Sapienza and Louis, and all the staff, because we are, you know, a lot, is at your disposal. I also take the chance of saying thank you to all our PhD students, which are the core of this staff, and hopefully I wish you all a great day, because in the end, as Alberto was saying, is also one of the most important things is, you know, to meet once again, to meet friends and colleagues, and to share what we are doing actually in our research, but sharing, you know, in a different mood, because when we meet, it's always a different mood. So thank you to all of you. Of course, it would be a pleasure for you if you can stay and listen to our keynote speaker, but I understand that you have a lot of duties, so it's up to you. I give you a minute to think about it. If you have to go, please. But if you want to stay, you are very welcome. Thank you very much. Grazie. E qui c'era uno stacchetto musicale. Che fine ha fatto lo stacchetto musicale? Questo lo posso dire in italiano. Grazie. Ah, ecco, arriva. Perché lo stacchetto musicale? Because this musical floor, is actually perfect to announce our keynote speaker. He is actually coming directly from the G20 in India. He told me just a few minutes ago that he took 6 flights in 5 days. When I asked him if he is going to prepare a slide, he said, never. And I said, you are great, because I definitely agree that when you have to speak, you have to speak, and then the slides comes later. It's a pleasure for me to have here as the first keynote speaker of this day, Sony Kapoor, please, an applause. Thank you very much for flying here to Rome. Sony, you are taking the floor, and the sun is actually, you know, starting to appear. Thank you very much, Sony. I know something about this speech, but not too much. So it will be a surprise also for me. But what I can say is that Sony posed me so many questions about the contents of the conference so many questions about, the papers that we received, the contents of the papers that we received, because he was trying to fine-tune this speech with respect also to what our colleagues and and the academics are actually doing in terms of sustainability, in terms of research, in favor of sustainable finance and so on. So, Sony, I leave you the floor. We have half an hour, but if you can leave some minutes for questions afterwards, I mean, we have time because then we have the coffee break. So we are okay. We are not stressed about that. Thank you very much once again. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me. I made sort of 7 bullet points, and these are my notes. I hope that by the time I'm done speaking, you will not regret having invited me. Because I want to be difficult, because I think it's very important to be provocative, and I think I have been allowed the space to be. So, why am I here, and why are we having this discussion, and what is this about? Well, I've had a portfolio career for about 25 years. Part of it has been within the financial sector, investment banking, derivative trading, private equity, asset management, sort of the whole lot. But I've always sort of kept one foot in the university system, sort of academia. So I've had multidisciplinary roles at the LSE, and my current day job is I'm an interdisciplinary professor of climate, geoeconomics, and finance at the Robert Schuman Center at the EUI in Firenze. And I've also just, as of today, finished role advising the Indian G20 across a number of dimensions. So let's paint some context before we get into the discussion, right? So the context is as follows, and this is a real story that happened. In mid-September this year, Nigeria, the most populous country in Africa, 220 million people and counting, had a total collapse of its electricity grid for about 10 to 12 hours, right? And I'm reasonably sure it did not make it to the front pages of the Italian media or media anywhere else, right? And I think that is a massive, huge indictment of all of us and our failures, right? Because what at the end of the day is the objective of the fancy acronyms we use within ESG, of the times we pat ourselves on the back for impact investing, and how we in the EU go around flying a green flag of green finance and sustainable finance, when we forget about the real world context, right? The majority of the world's population lies not in Italy, not in the EU, elsewhere, and that is their reality. So the total effective generation capacity, electricity generation capacity for the whole country of Nigeria, with 220 million people, is less than that for the city of Austin, Texas, where my sister lives, with 1 million people, right? So let me start with a very provocative, very personal to you Italians, thought experiment, okay? And this is as follows. And I use this when I want to stir controversy with my colleagues at the EUI, and I say the following, right? A world where Nigeria, despite everything we know about corruption, collapse of rule of law, everything else, right? A world where Nigeria, with the youngest demographic profile in the whole world, okay? It has the youngest demographic profile in the whole world. I think more than half of the population is under 18, okay? With a tax to GDP ratio of less than 20%, okay? 18, 17, something along those lines. With a structural shortage of capital so bad that if you just threw dollars on the street there, I can guarantee you that in any real world understanding of what impact means, that will have much more impact than the most well thought of due diligent investment in impact that you could make in the EU, right? And with facing, being, I think, in the top 5 countries most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and being in the bottom 5 globally in having contributed to climate change, right? So a world where Nigeria gets locked out of international borrowing at 37% debt to GDP, which it has, right? While Italy, with, frankly speaking, our best days behind us, demographic decline, a shrinking workforce, with a relatively saturated tax to GDP ratio of more than 40%, can borrow 150% of GDP for, not much money, is a world that is fundamentally incompatible with boosting global economic growth. It is a world fundamentally incompatible with tackling climate change or any of the other multiple environmental crises confronting us. It is a world fundamentally incompatible with delivering on the SDGs or the development agenda that we keep paying lip service to. And it is a world fundamentally incompatible with any academic or real world practical notion of efficient allocation of capital, right? So my aim is not to reduce how much Italy can borrow at a reasonable cost, but my aim is to double what Nigeria can borrow as a percentage of GDP compared to Italy. So if Italy can get away with borrowing 150% of GDP, Nigeria should be able to borrow 300% of GDP in order to make the investments that it desperately needs in basic infrastructure, energy, human capital development, etc. That is the scale of the challenge we confront before us today. And so the question I always ask in my research work and when I lecture my students is, what is our contribution in academia, in our day jobs, to this scale of challenge, right? Are we real in, honest look in the mirror? Are we contributing even marginally towards confronting this challenge? And if we are not, I think we need to seriously rethink our assumptions. So that is the scale of the challenge. So with that in mind, I just wanted to mention that I have been, for a very long time involved in what is broadly known as the ESG investing community. I was supposed to be one of the early pioneers. I'm supposed to be the father of climate stress testing, which I introduced in 2007, 8, and spent many years trying to mainstream. Spent years on impact investing, have worked for donkey's years with the IFC, with the development finance institutions, private institutional investors. And we wrote the first version of what has become the EU Green Deal many, many years back. And so I've been involved in all these processes. And as part of my portfolio career, I sit on the investment committees of a number of sovereign wealth funds, large institutional investors, but also venture capital firms. So I'm deeply enmeshed in this, right? So this is much more, I think, a criticism of me and my work and my search for meaning and impact as it is for you. So I'm trying to warn you off some of the mistakes that my colleagues and I have been making for the past few decades, right? So with that in mind, what is the original proposition, right? So when ESG was first introduced, the basic idea, right, the intuitive idea was that, there are these additional sources of information and analytics that are not being considered as part of the investment process. And doing this will improve the average environmental outcome in the world, right? Will improve society and will improve governance. So that was the original thesis, that somehow having ESG around explicitly, right, would improve the environmental, social, and governance state of the world, okay? And that remains the proposition. So the question is, you know, are we succeeding or failing? Let's come to that. The second related issue was, let's say, plausibility, right? So it's think of this as MRV, measurement and verification and reporting, right? So how will we know? You know, how do we measure what is good E versus bad E? What is good S versus bad S? You know, how do we measure the delta? Have we improved things since before we started making that investment or engaging? That's the plausibility. The third is the whole discussion on profit, right? So does ESG deliver higher profitability or prospects for higher profitability? Is there a reasonable thesis in the midterm or the long term, right? The fourth is the penalty, which is, does ignoring ESG result in higher risks and losses? And again, you know, in the long term or the short term, you can decide. The fifth P is the process. And there are various hierarchies, right? There's ESG indices, there's engagement, there's impact reporting, there's all these, you know, green finance instruments, green bonds, etc. And then within process also fits, you know, how within the credit rating system, the loan disbursement system, the investment and asset allocation systems of financial actors, do you put ESG considerations in the process, right? And there, the gold standard is supposed to be fully ESG integrated. That's the catchphrase. And I have something to say on that. The next is prognosis. And there, you know, the question is, so having done what we have been doing with ESG, is there a reasonable, empirically justifiable thesis, either backward-looking or forward-looking, that can associate it with better real-world outcomes, outperformance on environment, changes in behavior, so on and so forth, right? And there, again, there was a big divide. Things looked relatively good in empirical studies up until Corona and the Ukraine war. And then many of those academic studies that, for example, claimed massive ESG outperformance and so on and so forth have basically sort of gone shut because the whole thesis changed dramatically over the past 2 years or so. And the question is, you know, was it robust enough to, in the first place, is 5 years of data, you know, good enough to make the kind of claims that were made, sometimes at 99, 95% confidence levels? And last but not the least is, you know, what is all of this for? And that was the question I started with, purpose, right? So it's very nice. It's a massively growing field. It's very fashionable in financial circles, in academia. Students are excited about it. Newspapers report on it. You know, every newspaper has an ESG team now. But to what effect? What are we, what is our purpose and what impact are we having in the real world? Okay, so to continue to dig. So I do a lot of professional trainings for asset managers, for ECB supervisors, etc. And I also occasionally teach. And I set the various groups that I interact with the following very simple task, okay? So I say, okay, now everybody, without consulting with your colleagues, tell me what all should go within the E indicator of ESG, right? So what parameters, what is the universe of environmental indicators that you think are relevant? You know, is it chemicals? Are you looking at carbon footprint? Are you looking at use of plastics, water, impact on biodiversity? And you can well imagine, right? Every single person in this room, very well informed, will have a justifiable, reasonable, different answer to the number of indicators that should be in the universe. Should it be 5? Should it be 10? Should it be 20? The next question, what relative weight do you put on each of these indicators, right? If you have in real life experienced real devastation from flooding or from climate change, versus if you happen to be around a factory like in Bhopal in the 1980s that poisoned and killed many, many people, you will have a very different intuitive importance attached to chemical toxicity versus climate change, right? Which is very reasonable. If your educational background is in the biological sciences, you will probably put a higher weight on biodiversity. And then the third question is, within each of these, which specific indicator do you want to choose? Because each of these, there are 5, 10, 20 possible indicators. And then you repeat the same exercise on the social aspect, and then you repeat the same exercise on governance, right? And you can group people in different ways. You can let individuals come up with their own thing. And you very quickly find out that any group of 20 or 100 of the most well-intentioned, well-informed, intelligent people will come up with E indicators and scores, S indicators and scores, G indicators and scores that basically look nothing like each other. And this is born out of good intentions and being well-informed. And that highlights, the fundamental challenge in the field. That we use numbers, we use scores, we use fancy econometric techniques, we come up with confidence levels, but what is the meaning of that score? And I haven't even added the question, right, of what, while trying to come up with a single number that you can use in your empirical analysis, is the relative weight you will put on E versus S versus G, where again, very reasonable, well-meaning people will come up with entirely different weights, right? And so we have to sort of recognize at a fundamental level that the empirical basis and the facade, and the foundation of the whole discipline is very weak. And, it's very easy to get lost in the numerics and the indicators and forget that basic common sense view of the serious limitations within our field of what we're doing. And I urge you not to forget that, right? The next question is, so going back to the proposition, I can give you a personal example. So I was very involved in some of the early victories of the divestment movement. And I advised the key players, and I was a strategy advisor to the Norwegian government and the oil fund. And I led the part that led to for the oil fund to divest. And the question now is that still a sensible thing to be aiming for? And that brings me to another important point, right? So clearly, the advocacy strategy, research approach, policy solutions one is looking for in the early stages of a new discipline, a new approach, as it was in the good old days of ESG and divestment, etc., back in the 2000s, early 2000s, would naturally be different from the ones that are appropriate once these things have been mainstreamed, right? But that has not happened. We have not kept pace. The fact of the matter is ESG is now, it's all pervasive. Everybody talks about it. So there was a time it was appropriate to think of ESG and divestment and sustainable finance professionals or advocates as the barbarians at the gate. We were sitting outside, we were knocking hard at the door, trying to keep our foot in, right? Because we were desperately just desperate to get heard, to get on the agenda, right? That's not the problem anymore. Everybody talks about us, right? I mean, there's regulations, God knows, endless new regulations coming in. Everybody has endless staff employed on these issues. Everybody pays lip service. Every board has at least one ESG specialist. These things are discussed. And our strategy has not kept pace, right? So the fundamental problem, for example, on divestment now, is not whether one particular investor has invested in fossil fuels or not, but it is what is the globally optimal way of organizing our financial system in a manner that cash flow positive, often highly profitable existing fossil fuel assets will be shut down, run down, before it would be done on a purely financial basis, right? So the question then is, does it make sense to push fairly transparent, often listed, Swedish institutional investor existing in a context of, very environmentally friendly sort of Swedish regulation, to divest all fossil fuel assets to private equity investor, funded often by national sovereign wealth funds, who you cannot influence, right? So it may make sense if all what you care about is your guilt. You're like, I don't want my pension money. But, at some point, that is the absolute wrong question to ask. The only relevant question is, what is the contribution of what you are doing towards fossil fuel assets being run down faster than they would be on a pure risk-return basis? And how are you contributing to that? So one idea to explore, for example, is to take and this is the approach I have suggested, you take a backdate. You say, okay, it doesn't matter whether you own fossil fuel assets or not, we just stop with the whole divestment discussion. That's crap, okay? All that matters is on a backward date, let's say the 31st of December, 2022. Did you or did you not own some fossil fuel assets, right? And if you did, as long as that particular asset in the real world will continue to have emissions, those emissions will always be assigned to you, irrespective of whether you have divested it or whatever, right? So it's your responsibility because, frankly, you should not have been holding a fossil fuel asset on the 31st of December, 2022, right? I mean, what part of signing up to 1.5 degrees or whatever you did make sense? So those are the sorts of big questions, incentive structures, vehicles we need to be thinking about. And we're not doing that. Another way of thinking about this is, again, on sort of the ESG front. And this is, again, a real world example. So if you take the average sort of, bog standard ESG filter used by the largest institutional investor, let's just say BlackRock, for example, okay? And you apply it to something as mainstream and liquid as the MSCI Global Equity Index, okay? Instantly, the weight of emerging and developing economies falls by about 20%, right? And we all know why. The average EM firm is potentially smaller. The local regulations are less stringent on environment and social and governance grounds, right? And they are, data is harder to come by, and they are less sophisticated on these issues, right? I mean, we've been doing this for donkey's years, and they've only recently started. But what does this do? So I will make the following controversial claim. I haven't checked this out empirically, but maybe it's a good research question for someone. So has the EU's approach on ESG over the past 15 odd years led to a net improvement of average E, S, and G outcomes globally, or has it led to a deterioration of E, S, and G outcomes? Because frankly, I'm not sure, right? So if what matters to you, and this goes back to the fundamental question, right? So if in the defining proposition, when you were making your thesis for ESG, it was that, for this investor, I want to see the emissions associated fall I want this investor's contribution to biodiversity loss being minimized, and so on and so forth, right? But the question was, the original purpose is, we want the environmental outcomes in the world to improve, we want the social outcomes in the world to improve, and we want governance in the world to improve. In which case, the proposition, the appropriate investment approach to ESG is actually to seek out the absolute worst performers, right? The absolute laggards, mining companies in China, for example, or in parts of India where the coal miners lose 25 years of life expectancy, right? To seek out the worst of the worst and put your money in them, use that leverage that you have with that money to get there, to get them to clean up their, excuse my language, shit, right? But we are doing exactly the opposite, right? How is this helping? What needs to be done? And again, I just go back to the fundamental question I asked, which is, can we not, as researchers, as practitioners, lose track of why this whole field is relevant and growing in the first place? Can we make sure we are making a contribution that actually makes sense in the global context? Can we at least stop undermining what we say we are trying to do, right? So clearly, the structural shortage of capital lies in emerging economies. I use the example of Nigeria. And if by applying ESG filters, you reduce the already very little money that makes its way into Nigeria, it's a serious question to ask if you're doing God's work or the devil's work, right? However good your intentions might be. Have I been controversial enough yet? Which leads to the next question, process. So so this is pre-corona days, I've lost sense of time, but I did a Global CFA Society debate with BlackRock on ESG issues. And for that, I, through my professional networks, managed to get hold of some interesting data. And the question I asked was, between being fully ESG integrated, which is, as I said, is the gold standard on ESG, and not being so, I wanted to see how the portfolios of large investors such as BlackRock, State Street, Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, etc., changed, right? So the numbers, roughly speaking, that I found was that the difference between not having ESG and using ESG filters, being fully ESG integrated, in terms of the delta, the change to portfolios, was less than 0.3%. And this reminds us of the importance of process, right? So what does it mean to be fully ESG integrated? It means simply that you are taking, at every stage of the investment process, you are taking ESG issues into account, okay? Whatever that means. Two portfolio managers, same portfolios, take into account the same ESG indicators, and it's completely reasonable, right, without saying anyone is good or bad, that they come to very different conclusions on, how to underweigh or overweigh their portfolio. But what's inescapable is the aggregate real world impact in an optimistic scenario of the best processes we have to incorporate ESG is macroeconomically, financially insignificant, right? And so I, again, caution us to always make sure that we take into account what goes under the hood and what comes out of the other end of all the processes. So let me also use, go a little bit into, what is the most fashionable part of the sustainable finance landscape. And that's sort of green bonds, right? So in every case study, in every real world scenario, every academic study, green bonds are used as the example of success in green finance, right? So I have been involved for a long time. I was asked to be on the board of the CBI, the Climate Bond Initiative, about 10 years back. I couldn't do it. I was too busy. I haven't done it, but I've stayed involved. And this is, again, a real world story, right? So now there is a large Nordic institutional investor, okay? Let's say the Norwegian Oil Fund. Now they come under a lot of pressure from the activists, from the NGOs, even from the government to say, hey, particularly because we made our money from oil, we have to signal, we have to show we're contributing to the transition to tackling climate change, okay? So they get pressured into making a public commitment to buying $10 billion, or to setting aside a $10 billion allocation to green bonds, right? Then you have Germany, France, the UK, activists pushing their governments to issue green bonds, right? So they all succumb to the pressure and they say, okay, you know what? In our fundraising for the government budget, France, Germany, the UK, they all decided they were going to issue green bonds, okay? So now the Norwegian Oil Fund owns more than $100 billion of European government bonds, okay? So what happens? It lets some of them mature, and when they do, the plain vanilla government bonds are replaced by buying the German, French, and British green bonds, right? Now, can we take a look in the mirror and ask, how has this, in any meaningful, measurable way, contributed to bending the climate curve, right? Is there anything that the German, French, even Italian or British state could not do, fund, invest in, that they could only do if they fundraised using green bonds, right? Absolutely not a thing. So two sets of actors, institutional investors and governments, who were successfully pressured by, it's a David versus Goliath story, by groups of activists, students, Greta Thunberg, marching, spending their scarce time into making tangible policy commitments on green finance, sustainable finance, have done so, have executed the commitments they made, and nothing has changed on climate. And these two sets of actors then go around beating their chest, produce fancy sustainable finance reports, and nothing has changed on the ground, right? And it's worse than that, because the green bond investors are more likely to be ESG integrated and ethically conscious, more reputationally aware. They don't want reputational risk, right? So the green bond portfolio is even more likely to be biased in favor of the rich, sophisticated, highly rated economies and companies than the average outstanding corporate bond and sovereign bond portfolio in the world, right? So once again, you are further skewing an already tilted landscape against the developing and the emerging economies that have a structural shortage of capital, are facing impossible challenges of pursuing development and sustainability simultaneously, having the global financial landscape further tilted against them, right? So there's, again, potentially a simpler solution to that. And the question I asked the European Commission was, so, okay, you know what? Let's take $1 billion worth solar PV project, okay? In Germany, in Peru, and in Nigeria. Now, in Germany, even if it's funded with green bonds, has it done something that would not otherwise have happened? No, right? In Peru, without this project issuing green bonds, would this project have happened? It's a little bit touch and go. It's hard to say. Let's say that, you know, instead of 1 gigawatt solar, you would have only ended up with 750 megawatt or 500 megawatt, right? But it probably would have gone ahead, okay? And in Nigeria, you know, it's almost certain, we can say with a high degree of confidence without looking at our numbers, that, yeah, you know, it probably wouldn't have happened otherwise, right? So that same $1 billion of green bonds issued by Nigeria, issued by Peru, issued by Germany, have an entirely different real-world impact, which is not measured, right? So one possible solution to this is you have two parameters. So there's a firm in Norway which has been taken over by S&P, and it's called Cicero, and it does ratings of green bonds. And it has developed a methodology called shades of green, where they say dark green for projects that are compatible with 1.5 to 2 degrees. So renewables get dark green, transition get light green. So if you're replacing coal with gas, you know, it's hard to say whether it's actually compatible or not. And then there's, you know, so there's shades of green. So I have said, okay, well, why don't we have 2 dimensions? So one that says, okay, compatibility, the greenness of the project being financed. And the second dimension is, let's say, the income group of the country where the investments are being made. Is it high income developed? Is it lower middle income country? Is it a least developed country? And let's say you put 5 points in each, right? So by that point, projects scored 10 would only be renewable energy projects in a least developed country where it would not otherwise have happened, right? So if you start giving credit, if you say to the Norwegian oil fund, you cannot claim credit till and until you show us the score of, you know, you need to have a minimum threshold of a score of green bonds, let's say 8. Those are the sorts of things that, again, with relatively small tweaks, can help redirect capital towards where it is actually generating impact on the ground and is compatible with, and those are the sorts of big questions we need to be thinking about, right? Let me use another example, this time from the impact space. So there's a lot of work that goes in, again, good intention work with measuring and reporting impact. And I advise a number of the development finance institutions, including on this issue. And my question, my point to them is sort of roughly as follows, right? Some of the most meaningful, impactful investments that can be made are the ones that would be the hardest to measure, to report on, and to be able to show a clear causality for, right? And while I very much welcome that there needs to be, you know, empirical soundness, data, measurement, verification, and all of that, from a good governance perspective, at some point, we make the perfect the enemy of the real world. And again, I have seen this happen in real life on multiple occasions. More and more of impact funds are being diverted towards things where things are easier to measure, report on, claim credit for, put case studies on in nice stories, rather than things where that would all be fuzzy, but which in any intuitive sense would generate a far greater real world impact. And once again, you know, it's important to be empirically sound, but data can only take us so far, right? Let us not forget the broad purpose of what we have devoted our careers to. With that, I'm going to shut up, and I would love to take some questions if I haven't been controversial enough yet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sony. Disruptive enough, I would say. But I definitely agree. I mean, I really, if I can, so I give time to the audience to think about some question. But if I can summarize in 4 keywords, you know, the journey you have made in this speech, I would say worldwide. The ESG is a worldwide issue. is not a local issue. It has to do with materiality analysis.
Yeah.
Has to do with materiality analysis and significant contribution.
Yeah.
And has to do with outcomes. While if I think for instance, at the European framework, I see that the framework is local.
Yeah.
I see that the materiality analysis there is a materiality analysis, but it's risk-driven, is the analysis of the materiality of risk.
Rather than contribution.
So the contribution, the significant contribution which is within the framework has no sense.
Absolutely.
And of course, this leads to an output perspective and not an outcome perspective.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I summarize.
I think that's perfect. Yeah.
Thank you. But it's my view, and I usually stress maybe too much this point, saying that I really appreciate what the European legislator has done, but until now it's too much risk-driven and supply-driven. While the materiality analysis is a materiality of impact. And I like so much the passage you have done on products, on green bonds. And even with respect to our research, because we are researching a lot on green bonds. There, even today we will have papers on green bonds. But what we do is to take data on a large scale and to work this data without going inside, without going deeper into, for instance, the ESG framework, which is behind the emission of the green bond. And these ESG frameworks are structured or not on the basis of a materiality analysis. Because if I bid with the market, maybe on the sustainability linked bond, if I bid with the market, and say, if I improve my ESG performance, then I will pay less.
Yeah.
But this makes sense if the improvement gives a significant contributions. But if it is not, it doesn't make sense. And the significant contribution comes from the materiality analysis. And you will realize that just looking at the ESG framework, not at the data, at the large data. And this is something that I think we all should reflect when we start our research, because we are too much, this is my feeling, but we are too much oriented to a macroeconomic approach. While if we concentrate on finance, we have to go, on the single aspect, on the product, on a more, managerial approach, which is less misleading at this stage of this, transition path of the ESG integration. Any questions for Sony? Yes, there is. Please stand up, and I don't know if we have a microphone for question, but okay, but we can hear you. Yeah, sure. You present yourself.
I'm Dr. Schneider from the University of Paris Law, and I've been a practitioner in sustainable finance for more than 25 years. Thanks for your very corrosive introduction. However, when you mention ESG issues, somehow you kind of consider ESG as a target itself, whereas ESG was first introduced as a means to achieve the target, which is, as you explained in the end, as you explained in the end, a contribution to sustainable development. And if ESG is only, if it's only adding more data, then, it's marketing. Marketing of asset management, disparate asset management company. So I agree with you that this target contribution is difficult to assess. But if we just forget it, well, we know we're going to go nowhere. And maybe I have a question is, what do you think about the attempts of the EU, or so far it's only an attempt, to regulate and to define better what should be the target of sustainable investment, and not only the how desperating marketing transparency guidelines that we had before. Thanks.
Let me take all the questions at once, so there's more. Please.
Question here. Lucia Alessi.
Thank you.
Ilaria.
Lucia Alessi, European Commission. So I have a question on the definition of green and sustainable, if you want, but let's stick to green because, as you know, in the European Union, we have developed the taxonomy for sustainable activities. There are other taxonomies being developed elsewhere in the world. And my question is, we have a definition of green which is quite ambitious, and the claim is that in other parts of the world that's too ambitious. I mean, it's not attainable because they are starting from different starting points. So the point is, would it be okay to have a relative definition of green, or do we need to have one because, you know, more than this amount of pollutants in the water is toxic, full stop, anywhere in the world? Thanks.
There was one question there.
Fabiola Schneider, assistant professor in Dublin. I really liked your point on when you said emissions and looking in the past, it really matters what you held in 2002. And then you mentioned divestment and the struggles with it. So I was wondering your take, because in the voice versus exit literature, divestment versus engagement, it's usually all about equities. So when you said holding assets, were you referring to equities, or would you broaden that approach and also include debt, which is a bit difficult then because, well, debt matures, so refinancing cycles and so on. There's a lot of talk now. Usually it's ignoring debt, but bond stewardship is something that comes up, and I was wondering what your take on that is.
There was more questions there.
Okay, last question.
Yes, hi, my name is Dieter from the World Bank. Thank you very much for your points. I have a comment and a question. Hopefully you have enough time for those. So the first comment is, we're working a lot on sovereign ESG and mostly on fixed income, in fact. So exactly your point. And our struggle was that the ESG part is not really that we say it doesn't have impact, it doesn't have, it's not doing enough engagement or stakeholder engagement. Our problem was that it wasn't clear what the point of the ESG scores are. Your point of saying, how does the E score weigh against an S score? We're wondering, why should it be a weighted average to begin with? Like, is a good E score better than a bad S score, and on average you're fine again? So for us, the question was, is this whole point a risk management exercise, an investment factor exercise, or an impact exercise? Because if it's an impact, you could make the perverse claim and say, well, just sort the indicators, flip them around, and then you know where to go, right? The ones with the bad scores you should invest to. But then maybe that's one of the questions. How do you ensure that you get the money back in those cases as an investor? And one last question is about SLBs. I'm working a lot on sustainability-linked bonds, and so I'm a bit biased, but I'd be very curious to hear what you think in terms of relating them to green bonds. Thanks.
Should I take, or is there any more question, or shall I answer?
Yeah, I think you should answer. And then, of course, for other questions and other, curiosity, I mean, we have the coffee break you can share, and then you have the whole day with Sony, so you can share, later on. Otherwise, we will go too late. We would make too late.
Well, let me give a tiny bit of context here, right? So, the present situation in the world is that if India, and I use India here as a proxy for emerging economies, and if you take India, which is a lower middle income country, and others, there's already 3.2 billion people just in lower middle income countries without even going to sub-Saharan Africa, right? So if India reaches half the resource intensity that China has today, the world loses 2 degrees, irrespective of whether we reach net zero in the EU in 2025, which we will not, right? And if India reaches the resource intensity that China has today, the world loses 2.5 degrees, right? So the world cannot allow India and other emerging economies to follow what remains till date the only tried and tested development model that worked for any country larger than Singapore over the past 100 years, right? And India and Bangladesh and Nigeria cannot afford not to try and follow China because there is no alternative, right? So that is the overarching macro context, which is why any discussion on sustainability, climate change, biodiversity, that doesn't start with this fundamental big elephant in the room is going to fail and fail dramatically and might even be counterproductive, as I said, right? The second macro point to remember is, and I've been guilty of it twice, and I deeply regret it, right? And we go around saying, waving our arms, you know, in 95% of the world, solar is the cheapest form of power, right? It absolutely is not. That is very limited, levelized cost, which is a very narrowly defined concept over the 30-year lifetime of a project. You know, what is the cash flows like? And with assumptions that are that there is no binding capital constraint, there is no binding liquidity constraint, there is no binding foreign exchange constraint, and you have access to the grid, and you have base load or storage capacity to handle independency, right? These are the 5 assumptions. And I gave you the story about the state of the Nigerian power system and grid, right? So let's say, you know, let's say I've spent my whole life in Norway. I've never been to an emerging, developing economy. And I say, hey, what are they like? I don't understand them. The first thing you'll say is massive structural shortage of capital. Second thing you'll say is repeated liquidity black holes. Third thing you will say is massive, repeated foreign exchange crisis. The fourth thing you'll say is crappy infrastructure. There's no grid to speak of. The fifth thing you'll say, storage? No. I mean, they can't even generate, you know, leave alone storage. And those are all the real ones, right? So effectively, what we in the OECD, in the rich world, are asking the developing economies to do is to embark on a development trajectory that requires 2 to 3 times, just on renewable energy alone, of more upfront capital investment, whatever the levelized cost may be, without being willing to provide that capital. So we are asking them to follow a trajectory that requires the one thing, much more of the one thing they don't have. And in any 5 to 10 year political investment, financial decision-making horizon, business decision-making horizon, whenever there's a trade-off between development, whether it's primary education, basic healthcare, or mitigation, you know what everybody will choose. Everybody will always choose development, right? So there is no way of tackling the climate, biodiversity, environment crisis that does not first require us finding out a new development model that is able to reconcile growth rates of the 6 to 8% that countries like Nigeria and India desperately need with increasingly binding multiple environmental constraints. And that is the context for the EU discussion, right? So on EU defining contribution through ESG, the central question cannot be a navel-gazing one, which is what is the impact within the EU or by EU institutional investors, which is what is the contribution of the ESG sustainable finance agenda to this central question? And that is not the question being asked. That is not the legislation being discussed. On taxonomy too, right? So much oxygen was taken up, so much time was spent on taxonomy. But mostly in the navel-gazing European context. And the fact of the matter is, going back to the central development versus climate trade-off, yes, India faces a very different objective function. Nigeria faces a very different objective function from the domestic German or French or Swedish investment environment. And so applying a one-size-fits-all approach, or using CBAM, which again, seems to be coming from a good intention. I was part of the discussion, and with far too many of these discussions, there's always a protectionist constituency to them, right? Is it fair for us to be having this discussion on CBAM given our relative historical contribution? So I said, I advise a number of venture capital firms. I'll use a very specific example. A Swedish green steel firm has been in the news, in the FT. They've been very successful at raising money. And I went and I asked them, so the context is most green technologies are being developed either in China or in Europe or the United States, right? Because that's where the venture capital is. So I asked them, I said, so what's the plan for rolling out at scale in places like India? There is no plan. Too many of green venture capital investments are focusing on what they hope is going to be a premium market with a greenium, low volume, high margin market in the developed world, right? But the point is, does it matter if the next steel installation in Sweden is green or not? Who the hell cares? Does it matter if all of the steel, cement, infrastructure installations that will be put forward in the developing world between now and 2050 are the latest, most cutting edge, the greenest possible technologies? Absolutely, yes. Without that, the numbers don't add up. India alone is expected to use more steel and cement than the United States, the EU, Africa combined over the next 20 to 30 years, right? We just haven't realized with our navel gazing that this is primarily a global question with only a global solution. And the only thing that matters is what is our contribution towards that. On ESG and SLBs and green bonds, I'm engaged in the discussion, in the debate, and there's perverse outcomes sometimes, right? You get a higher margin because interest rate because the company or the sovereign fails on the sovereign targets, and it's not a settled issue. The only thing I can hope is we make sure we don't make the same mistakes as we did with the green bonds. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sony. Thank you so much. Very interesting start, I would say. Very happy about that. Thank you for sharing these, thoughts with us. And I feel that, the audience has really appreciated, and, I think we can go on maybe during the coffee break and during the whole day. Thank you very much once again. Thank you so much. So, as usual, we are late. So I try to reschedule a little bit just to give you some break, and also to me. Maybe it can work like that. So if chairs and authors and discussants agree, I would make things like that instead of starting, parallel sessions at 11 as it was scheduled. We can start, at, let's say, a few minutes before 11:30, and we will end the first round of sessions at 1:15. Then we will make the second round of 1 hour, 1:45 to 1:45, and then we will have 45 minutes for the lunch. Iniziamo? Bene, well, welcome back. Do hope you had a nice lunch time and coffee break, which was surprising also for me, downstairs instead of Aula 103. But anyway, we had it. So we start again with this afternoon. I'm sorry that Samuel Vigne is actually feeling ill. So you tried. he did his best, but unfortunately he was not able to reach us to join us today. But I know that Andrea had worked together with him in preparing this speech. So we are lucky somehow because we have Andrea here, and Andrea is actually playing the role of Keynote. I mean, he's very experienced in this. So thank you for changing position and behavioral attitude, and I give you the floor for this speech, which is a special, which takes a special perspective, but I don't want to to say anything. So I give you the floor, I leave you the floor, and thanks twice, first for the speech and second because of this situation. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thanks, Mario, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry for that. Unfortunately, I'm not Sam Vigna, obviously, and not John Goodall as well. But yeah, I try to do my best in order to give you a couple of hints related to Research International Business and Finance Journal, how to publish academic papers, and some trending topics we accept in the journal. And finally, I will leave the floor to Mario and Milena in order to present you the special issue of this conference, also in rebuff. So first of all, I would like to read the message of John Goodall that texted me. John is the editor-in-chief of Rebuff, and unfortunately today is not with us. He's in Akron, but he thanks a lot, John, and all the Italian Academy. And he told me really to directly text him if you want to submit any paper to Research International Business and Finance, and not only this special issue. So just text him directly, no problem. And I would say he told me that the Italian Academy is one of his preferred academy. And so we will try to manage those papers in the best possible way.
So text him, maybe not all at the same time.
But exactly, not all today. So having said that, so I try to give you a couple of hints related to the editor's work, since I've been guest editor of several special issues as well, and I'm associate editor of Rebuff. So today we have received the paper number 1000 of 2023. So try to imagine that any editor has to do a lot of work. We have a lot of papers, we have a lot of topics. I personally manage almost all the bibliometric and systematic reviews we received in Rebuff. And so you have a lot of words in these slides, but you see that we have to do a lot of work even at the Academy. So conferences try to understand better which is the best topic right now, the hot topic right now. We have to handle paper, we have to select reviewers, we have to desk reject a lot of papers. No, this is the most important part, because if we have to manage 1,000 papers a year, then obviously almost the desk rejection has to be 50%, if not more. And so John in person, but any editor has to desk reject half of the paper. And when he gives us, as associate editor, the papers we have to handle, then even as we desk reject 30 to 40% of the paper as well. So this is the departing point. And so the point is how we can avoid the desk rejection, no? So first of all, we have to write a very, concise abstract. The research question has to be clear. And unfortunately, we have not a lot of time. And so for us, it's pretty important to understand the contribution. Again, in any methodology, the contribution is the first stuff. Unfortunately, we have a lot of papers, we have a lot of topics, and we have a lot of journals in finance as well. And so, guys, please be aware that the contribution is, the most important. The contribution is the topic. The contribution is not the geographical area, unfortunately. So let's not try to just replicate a paper with another geographical area. The contribution is not a time period, no. Why? Because just extended 1 year or a couple of years or adding the COVID situation is not the contribution of the paper. So we have to try to avoid the desk rejection in focusing on the quality of the paper. The quality of the papers, again, means the topic. And right now we try to give you some topics we are accepting in rebuff. A lot of topics, actually. You know, the journal Research International Business and Finance, so a cross-border between business and finance as well. So again, topics, but try to present us a very, even formal, a very high quality paper. So don't avoid any proofreading, don't avoid any following of the rebuff guidelines. So again, this is really important because we read any cover letter, we have to read any paper, and obviously the first part we read in the paper is not the methodology part. The first part is the abstract, then the introduction, then the contribution, and then the conclusion. We have no time, no? And since any day we have to manage 10 to 15 papers, then obviously, you know, you have to persuade us that your paper is better than the other one, actually. And so, again, another important point related to last year's especially, we have in Elsevier a very good plagiarism checks. So again, any paper with, let's say, 20% or more, you know, parts equal to other papers is just desk rejected from the system. So I cannot even check this paper personally. So again, be careful about that, and be careful even in, you know, paste and copy the methodology, paste and copy all the references, because, you know, we cannot do anything. It's just a desk reject for plagiarism. So again, attention to the keywords, attention to the cover letter, attention to the contribution, and, you know, those are the most important parts I have to tell you. So again, the topic, and you know, the focus of this conference is sustainable, no? And then the special issue is related to sustainable finance in a way that Milena and Mario will tell you afterwards. But the topic means more than just your paper. So the paper has to be written in line with the trend topics present in the journal. So my suggestion is really to cross-check the last 10 years of Research International Business and Finance if you want to focus on this journal. So actually, right now, I'm telling you how many topics we have, a lot. But again, if you are the first one to submit, let's say, a paper on a new topic, then your probability to get accepted is pretty low. No, you have to insert your paper within the trends and within the topics present in this journal. No, so again, cover letter is important, desk rejection is important for us. Think about that. Right now, we are accepting more or less 15 to 20% of all the papers. Okay, so the rejection rate is pretty high, even after the reviewer judgment, and we need to try to have this rejection rate, because right now, for the Italian guys present here, rebuff is an A-star in the Italian list, but also is a 2 ABS, and we try to, you know, next year, or again, the next, let's say, the next couple of years, or let's say 4 years, because the ABS list will change just in 3 years. We want to go to the 3 ABS star. So, you know, this is our, you know, our target. About rejection, John told me to tell you even this stuff. Right now, we have also the transfer system that is pretty important in Elsevier. So you can have your paper transferred to another journal in line with the aim and scope of the journal itself. So if you kind of desk reject your paper, we can offer this transfer is for free, and your paper can be handled by the editor of another journal. For example, we can, you know, transfer to International Review of Economics and Finance, to Finance Research Letter, to International Review of Financial Analysis, and so on the basis of the quality of the paper and in line with the aim and scope of the other journals. So again, another couple of points. We try to do our best in order to search reviewers. So you guys here are also reviewers. So if we send a paper, please accept it, because it's not easy. Accept in the sense, accept as a reviewer. It's not easy for us to find reviewers, unfortunately. It can take also a month, if not a couple of months. And unfortunately, maybe the coming back of your revision can be even late, more than 30 or 45 days, and that's a pity for the authors. So again, being a reviewer is important, and also as associate editor, I try to tell the reviewer, please send me back your comments, but it's not so easy to do that. So again, if you are an author, please, I have to apologize on behalf of all the editorial board, but it's not so easy to find reviewers in line with the paper. It's not so easy to persuade the reviewer to give back the comments in line with the timing. And so, we try to do our best, but again, it's a difficult job. 5 minutes, I have 5 to 10 minutes related to give you some numbers on rebuff. So in order to do that, I'm telling you, we run a bibliometric review on rebuff itself, on the journal. I'm one of the authors. The others are Kabir Hassan and John Goodell as well. And this is a bibliometric review of last year, and we try to assess all the most important part of research, international business, and finance. So basically, as a methodology, I'm not sure if you are aware of that, we try to have all the papers in rebuff, all the papers since the I don't recall the exact date, but I do think 20 years ago, no, more than 20 years ago, maybe 30 years ago was the first paper. We collected all the paper and we tried to analyze the most important trend, the most important topics and authors and so on, and the citations. You see that right now rebuff is growing a lot in terms of impact factor is 6.5, not that bad. And the site score is 9.1. I do think that in a couple of months we can reach even 10, so double digit, site score kind similar to Finance Research Letter, so really pretty high. And you see that I try to show you just some, some numbers related to rebuff. We have a lot of authors, obviously, we have a lot of universities, a lot of papers, and you see that we accept not just empirical article, more than 1,400, but also we accept the review article. And so we have the space reserved to the systematic review and the bibliometric review, and the space reserved to the empirical part. And you see here all the trended article, the most important article. So in all your submissions, you have to be aware that as an editor, we want rebuff to grow in terms of site score and in terms of impact factor. And so your articles should be cited by people. This is the most important stuff for us. As editor, we want to select the articles that in perspective, probably get more citation. And that's why I personally manage a couple of special issues on literature reviews, because they have a lot of citations. And that's why we want to focus on that. And that's why we want to focus on the trend topics right now. And within the trend topics, one of the most important right now is the 3-letter ESG and sustainable right now in the last couple of years. But as I show you, not in the last 20 years. So this is another point. Here we try to assess, the chart is from Vo's viewer, the figure maybe is not so easy to understand, but we wanted to assess all the research stream of our journal. You see that we have a lot of thematic stuff. We have corporate governance. We have a lot of papers in emerging market, actually. And until last year, a lot of papers assessing all the finance and COVID-19. So right now, please don't send papers on COVID anymore because we reject, right now. We have a lot of papers on cryptos, for sure, Bitcoin, and right now the focus is energy, oil and nat gas, but yeah, a lot of papers related to energy in the last couple of years. The financial crisis always with us. Let's say not only financial crisis, but financial crisis. Since 2008, a lot of papers assessing that, and now energy crisis, and then COVID crisis, and then whatever is the crisis is an important topic. Uncertainty. Then uncertainty right now is the word. Geopolitical risk, economic uncertainty, climate risk, whatever is uncertainty and risk is the word right now. Okay, so you see a lot of topics. From financial institutions, financial instruments, think about the green bonds, but also some specific part, Islamic finance as well. And we had a specific section on Islamic finance and, China. I have no the updated stats, but I guess that more or less 40 to 45% of submissions came from China. So you have a lot of competitors, guys, from the Far East. And yeah, unfortunately, and a lot of Chinese right now, guys, write very good papers. And so you see, not just all the topics, so corporate finance and finance as well, but also related to corporate governance, the board. You see some, points related to the board, related to the profitability. So corporate finance, financial institutions, financial instruments, and something related to business as well. But if I have to tell you, is more finance than business oriented. So whenever you are able to write an article, please think about a finance article, without a lot of, 6 to 7 pages of theory like business. Try to focus on the methodology, try to focus on the empirical stuff, try to focus on contribution and on robustness. Is okay, the theory, we want theory, but we don't want 5 to 6 or 7 pages of theory like in business, JIPS or other 4-star journal. So about the future research directions, in any bibliometric review, you well know it's important to understand the future research directions, and those are retrieved from most of the papers we accepted in rebuff, but other stuffs are related to what we think as editor and as authors. You see that in corporate governance, we have some papers asking for more research on, for example, focusing on specific area and specific religion like Islam. But another topic important, we had a lot of papers and we asked for more research related to the ESG, to the impact investing, and to the difference from other ethic stuff like Islam and other religion. So the role on corporate of fintech, fintech is another very good, topic right now. And for the last couple of years, I'm saying the fintech and investment efficiency, the fintech and corporate performance and market performance. And you see that a lot of authors asking for that. Then if we go to emerging markets, the emerging markets is a huge area. We focus on the BRICS for sure. So you all know the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. But please recall that we almost prefer a cross-country analysis. So whenever we check a single country analysis, we can go ahead, but for us it's better to have cross-country because it's always different to generalize a single country analysis. So again, if you run a cross-country analysis, you have better probability to go ahead in the process and to get your paper accepted, even in emerging markets. And then you see that in emerging markets, you have a lot of differences. For example, we love any paper comparing the emerging, so the developing and the developed market. It's a huge one. And, think about the population in emerging markets is huge, And that's why we want also those papers. Within the financial markets, think about the Chinese market, Even the performance of the last year not be pretty for sure, but we receive a lot of paper assessing the Chinese market, the tech market in China, the Hang Seng Tech, all the Far East indices for sure. And then this is also related to the regulation. So the word regulation is another important word in emerging and in developed market. So regulation, financial markets, tech stocks, cryptocurrency, all related to the emerging market area. Then financial crisis. We have crisis every couple of years, and so every paper comparing the crisis is within the objective of the rebuff for sure. Then we received a lot of paper on the energy crisis, as I told you, a lot of paper on the COVID-19 crisis, but also in a small crisis, like if you recall the trade war in 2018, the less small, I would say the government crisis in 2011 in Europe, and then the subprime financial crisis. One other paper heavily here is related to the subprime financial crisis. So again, this is always a hot topic, I have to tell you. Then COVID, then, the blockchain and the crisis, and then the crypto and the crisis. So whenever you have the crisis, then you can go in rebuff, and the methods in order to prevent and to assess all the crisis is important as well. Then volatility, risk, return volatility of financial instruments within the portfolio even is an important topic in commodity market as well right now. So the gold, the oil, and even the grains. We accepted paper also related to the agriculturals for sure. Risk, volatility, diversification within a well-diversified portfolio, so inserting commodities within a stock bond portfolio for sure. Then volatility of the different assets. So right now, obviously the cryptocurrencies, the commodities, comparing bonds and stocks. So for sure, any kind of stuff related to the volatility is really well accepted. And obviously, right now, the volatility related to the relatively new instrument like green bond, like social bond, and whatever is related to, let's say, even the exchange traded funds. That is another topic as well. And so crypto, no, I'm not a crypto guy, even if I publish a couple of papers, but the word crypto is, John loves the word crypto. So whatever is related to the indices, to the different cryptocurrencies, to the comparison, you will have a higher probability to go ahead for sure in this topic as well. So right now, since I gave you some hint of the rebuff, then with my colleagues here, we launched the special issue. Again, before turning on Milena and Mario for the special issue presentation, I'm going to tell you that the process is this one. So every paper comes to John in any case, that is the editor-in-chief, and then but in this case, as the editorial team, we directly manage all the papers. So again, John gives us the paper, and then the lead guest editor, that is Milena right now, is managing the papers, but the last word is from John, no? But in any case, the guest editor of the special issue is a kind of editor, okay? So we search for reviewers. Obviously, we try to select the best paper of the conferences. In this case, this conference fitting for the special issue, obviously, that is related to the materiality and sustainability. But in any case, if we have to focus on all the special issue we have in rebuff, just be careful about, let's say, the topic. So you will find in the system a lot of special issues. Some special issues are related to conferences, other issues are just related to a new topic. So in any time you want to submit to a special issue, so just be careful in fitting with the topics we propose. Otherwise, it is a desk rejection out of the aim and goal of the special issue. So if you are wondering if you submit to a special issue or not, so maybe it's better to submit to a regular issue. At the end of the day, John is there, I'm there, and so, we are the same guys, more or less. Mario? Up to you.
Thank you very much, Andrea. Thank you so much, really, for being clear, direct. I think this is very useful for all of us, and mostly for younger researchers, in order to not waste time on the one side, but also in order to better fine-tune your paper, because of course we cannot be driven totally by the special issue or by the journals. We also have to advance our research in an independent way, but also we have to take account what journals are looking for. So it's a sort of very peculiar equilibrium, and knowing how it works is very useful in order to orientate ourselves. So thank you very much, Andrea, for that. A few words on this special issue, and then I ask Milena to go deeper into more detail. I just want to stress one point, that we worked a lot, I would say, on the title, but the title, you know, it's a sort of sign of what's behind. And the idea was to do something, exactly, something that could fit with a journal and the trend journals are actually following and inspiring. But at the same time, we wanted to find out something that could, you know, really go deeper into the main problems and the main criticisms that we are actually affording in approaching this issue, this new age of sustainable finance. And I think that this idea definitely is very in great coherence with what Sony told us this morning, because the idea is actually based on the conception of materiality. And we started from the assumption that, especially because of the framework, the regulatory framework, materiality in sustainable finance is much more materiality of risks. And in the best scenario is a double materiality, which means how ESG factors can impact on risks and how firms can impact on ESG factors. But in fact, if we think at how sustainable finance can be expressed, I like to say, I like to label, you know, this sustainable finance impurity. Sustainable finance is more impact than risks. And materiality analysis has to do with impact first, and then with risks. So the idea was to blend these two frontiers, the one which is the most fashionable one, risks, and the other one which was the deep nature of sustainable finance. And this double perspective was the inspiring leitmotif of the special issue. And say that, I ask Milena to go deeper in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you very much clearly gave the flavor of what we wanted to do with this special issue. It's called impact and double materiality, because the literature on sustainability and risk and the interplay among those two variables, sustainability or impact investing, and the positive financial return is very, very mature. So what we really are looking for this special issue is a double lens approach, which sort of encompasses both perspectives at the same time. And it might sound, confusing or frightening, but actually it can be applied to many areas of sustainable finance. So the most straightforward one that comes to mind is the evaluation of ESG products, for sure. So this is a great stream, great outlet for these special issues. But financial regulation as well can be looked upon these double lenses, look at the pros and cons and the benefits that are under everybody's eyes, but as well the limitations that financial regulation might have. Think of the integrating accounting point of view, but another, I think, great area in which this double lens approach can be applied is ESG rating, for sure. And we've seen a couple of examples among the papers presented at the conference that really got the point, that really made this sort of perspective surface. So I'm not going to take you any further time. Just let me go to the nitty-gritty of the special issue. It will open on January the 8th, so you'll have some time, over the holiday to incorporate all the suggestions and comments that you can receive from the conference. And then you have up to the beginning of April when the special issue will close. So it will remain open for these 4 months. Of course, at the beginning, the first check is for the paper to have been presented at this conference and to fit in this double lens, double materiality approach. But if you want to know any further detail, if you want to just let us have a look at your paper prior to the opening of the special issues, we're here, just let us know. Just let us know. I usually work as associate editor of Rebirth, but together with Andrea, Professor, no, I was saying Mario, but it just scared me. With Sabrina and Professor Latorre, we are handling as guest editors this special issue. So we're here, just let us know, and coffee breaks are made exactly for that purpose. Thanks.
Thank you, Milena. I say Milena, so and so of course, Andrea, Milena, Sabrina, and myself, we are here for these 2 days and also afterwards. So we close the special issue in springtime. So remember. This is also give me the chance to be more clear on what is going on in this afternoon, because at the end, the last round, so the one that was supposed to start at 5, maybe will be like 5:30. Is also has 3 special sessions. One is an institutional session, which blended together published paper and unpublished papers by European Central Banks and Bank of Italy. And the other 2 sessions are dedicated to poster presentation. Please take a seat. I take the chance to thank you, Professor Claudio Giannotti, who joined us this afternoon for some greetings and in representation of our association, Italian Association of Teachers in Financial Marks and Intermediaries. Thank you, Claudio, for joining us, even if the agenda is always complex. Few minutes of greetings, and then we will start with the section. Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. Just really a couple of minutes. Okay, dear all students, colleagues, I'm very glad to give you my personal and institutional greetings on behalf of our Association of Lecturers in Banking and Finance. At the end of the conference and not the beginning of the conference, so there's no point in sharing with you, the importance of the topic.
At the end of the first day.
Of the first day of the day, yeah. So I don't want to share you the importance of the topic and some words about the papers and keynote speech that we had. I just want to apologize for not, because this morning I couldn't make these greetings in the morning, but, I was forced not to be here. And I want to thank University of Rome La Sapienza and University Unitelma and Sapienza and the University Luis for having organized this conference. Just one point that I want to remind myself and you that Mario Latorre, and I want to thank him, has been running this conference since 2017. So it's a very important stone within the ecosystem of the social impact field, finance field. I do believe that important international conference as this conference can help all of us to improve the knowledge, the culture and papers and scientific research towards the sustainable finance and sustainable wars. So thanks again, Mario, for having invited me.
We didn't make a deal.
We didn't?
We didn't make a deal.
Okay.
It's spontaneous.
Okay, and I'm very happy because I'm the treasurer of our society, and it's free of charge for me being with us, so being here. So thanks again, Mario, also for this point. I'm very happy for your conference and enjoy the last part of the conference of today.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Claudio. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to everyone. I would ask to the other authors on the other rooms to come here because we have the the closing, and I also ask to the to Lucia Alessi, Timo Bash, Marco Della Cresta, Maria Jesus Munoz, Fabiola Schneider, and I also ask Andrea to stay here just a second. It was a long day, I understand. Thank you for resisting because it was a matter of resisting actually, but it was interesting. I feel that we had a lot of interesting papers. Of course, you will be able to come back on the conference website later on because we will have photo, videos, and all the proceedings of the conference in the next few days, so that you can come back on this very intensive day. Nobody's coming. Okay. Come? Lucia, state qua. Lucia, poi Marta. Marta is around because Timo, please. Thank you. Thank you for resisting, Timo. You won't regret to join us for dinner because dinner is a different thing. It's an Italian dinner with some surprise as well. So Timo, Lucia, Marta. There's someone can look for Marta Della Cresta. Okay, and Maria Jesus and Fabiola Schneider. Okay. There is a reason why I'm, Please come here. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, so I will be short, and we will be short, but we have a couple of things at the end of this day. Of course, I recall you that we have for those who have scheduled it, we have a gala dinner at 8 in Palazzo Brancaccio, so we will meet there. Just the time for a shower, more or less. But the night is long, so I mean, take calm, and relax. But two things. The first one is something that I would have never done, and it's about our colleague and our friend and my friend Phil Molyneux, who has left us a couple of weeks ago. And Phil was, for me, was a special professor because I know him since when I was very young, attending my MA in Bangor. He was my teacher in banking and finance together with Ted Gardner. I have known him as a joyful guy, a very brilliant academic, and a very, very good person. So I know that here many of us knew him, and I think that he was deserving to remember him. I know that he will stay with us, but at the same time we will miss him. He was a joyful guy, as I said. So instead of having that sort of minute of silence, I will launch for him a big applause, because I think that's the best way to he would have hated me tonight because of such a long day, for sure. So, well, so second point is about, you know, this conference. There is a reason why I asked to our friends to stay here with us, and this is because since this year, we built a sort of new network around this conference. This network is basically a European network of European universities, not chosen, you know, on a random principle, but just looking at colleagues who were experts and passionate of sustainable finance since a long time. And for me, it's a pleasure that you all have accepted this kind of invitation and also this kind of challenge. The idea is to enforce this network and to also go for a sort of conference on an itinerary base. So not always in Rome, not always in Italy, but maybe, you know, exploring around Europe. We have already an idea for 2024, but we will confirm it in the next months. And I just want to thank you. I don't know if Lucia, who is actually at the center, as joint research center at the center of this network, want to spend a few words just to.
No, I think, thank you very much, Mario. I think it's late. You said it all. It's going to be a surprise where we have the conference next year. I'm not going to spoil, to give any spoiler. And no, thank you so much.
You want just a flash? Timo, or Timo is, you know, trying
Not
to.
much to say besides thank you so much. We're all excited to join
Yes.
University College Dublin. We'll be looking forward.
And Andrea Sopner, who
Yes.
is not here, but is one of the, you know, the leading actor of this initiative. Okay, so this was for today. It's enough. I'll meet you at the dinner, and then we meet again tomorrow morning, 9:30, with a different format, more based on roundtables and interviews, one-to-one. You will see. Tomorrow, same entrance, 9:30, but a different building, but then you will have extraction. Thank you very much. See you at Gala.